Tonight on PrimeTime, reconstruction plans for Gaza advance after US President Donald Trump announced over $7 billion in pledged support from his Board of Peace. Meanwhile, Palestinians have questions about what this money will mean on the ground. Money is pledged, but trust isn't guaranteed. Good evening. The White House says billions are ready to help rebuild Gaza. President Trump points to strong backing from his Board of Peace. But for some Palestinians, the question isn't just about funding. It's about control, transparency, and what this reconstruction really means for daily life.
Gazans hope that the billions of dollars that has been pledged towards the reconstruction of the Strip will actually benefit them. It comes after US President Donald Trump's first Board of Peace meeting on Thursday, where he announced contributions of more than $7 billion. However, Palestinians have reacted cautiously.
We hope that the reconstruction happens quickly and that the money that has been allocated truly goes to the right place and isn't mismanaged in any way.
No, of course I'm not optimistic because all of this feels pointless. It's just media talk and nothing will actually happen. There won't be any reconstruction. This is clearly part of a plan by the occupation with the Americans involved. Why? To push us out of our land and our country. God is sufficient for us and he is the best disposer of affairs. We pray, God willing, that it will be a blessed time and that reconstruction will take place. But in the end, I'm not optimistic at all.
Hamas has been reluctant to surrender its weapons under Trump's 20-point Gaza plan, which led to a ceasefire last October. Both sides blame each other for violations since the ceasefire began. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said there will be no reconstruction in Gaza until the territory is demilitarized.
And regarding Gaza, our forces are tightening their grip on the Strip from all directions. You were there, you know. According to the war objectives we set, Hamas will be dismantled of its weapons and Gaza will be demilitarized. And we agreed with our friends in the United States. There will be no reconstruction of the Strip before it is demilitarized.
Key issues likely to test the Trump's board's effectiveness in the months ahead include the disarmament of Hamas and the withdrawal of Israeli troops, the size of the reconstruction fund, and the delivery of humanitarian aid to Gaza's war-affected population.
Well, to help us unpack this, I'm joined now by Dr. Norhan El-Baya, Professor of Strategic Studies, who's joining us from Istanbul. Dr. El-Baya, thank you very much indeed for joining us. When you look at these reconstruction pledges, we've all seen the scenes, we've heard the promises. What do you think is driving the hesitation, the caution on the part of Palestinian communities?
It's basically the history of unfulfilled pledges. If we remember the post-2014 conflict, post-2016 conflict, post-2021 conflict, all of them, they were same. So the reconstruction was so slow, funds were slow, the reconstruction was constrained by political agenda, and also was the mechanism. It was very bureaucratic mechanism in terms of reconstruction. So already Gaza people, they went through this, but this time we can add more reasons. For example, we can see now Rafah crossing and the restrictions, the tough restrictions by Israeli side on Rafah crossing. This will lead to a slow or negative reconstructions in terms of the process, because the restrictions on material, on movements as well, this all will affect. Plus, lots of political groups or political agendas will control this. For example, the governance and the political uncertainty. Who will handle and who will manage the reconstruction? Is it the local Gaza Authority, or the technocrat authority, which is the Palestinian Authority, or external oversight, or international, as they call it, international oversight? So still ambiguity and uncertainty in this topic. So actually everything is uncertain related to reconstruction. It's only yesterday they stated that, okay, we collected 7 billions from 6 or 5 countries, members in the Board of Peace. Okay, but what will happen? What is the vision of the Board of Peace? It's pure uncertainty.
Okay, I mean, it's a good point you make there about, one thing is the money, the promise of the money, some hesitancy, some disbelief perhaps that money will actually come through, understandably from people who've suffered and feel they've had promises broken before. Another, though, is the political framework behind it, isn't there? Now, there is a broad range of countries, isn't there, involved in this? If you look at the people who are making the contribution, Qatar, for example, $1 billion, a country that's been a significant supporter of the Palestinian cause in the past. So understandably, there is caution, there is hesitancy, but this is a constitution, a group of countries that surely couldn't be argued would be in any way against the Palestinian people.
The political framework is very, very, very important. Just I have to highlight this because funding without credible structure, architecture or framework, it will not be well trusted. It will not be translated even into sustainable recovery for Gaza in general. So that's why framework is very, very important in this point, because even if they succeeded to collect 100 billion, if they succeeded to collect 500 billion, without clear framework and credible framework, it will not work. Plus, I have here to mention something that the structure determines whether you're gonna build or you're gonna make reconstruction or legitimacy. And here is the big question mark on Board of Peace. Their structure will determine what will be exactly their intention, or what is their intention now. Is it to control Gaza Strip, legitimacy, or their intention is for real reconstruction? Also here, I have to mention the governance part. Who will handle this fund?
I mean,
those billions.
Do you think to be fair to the Board of Peace, they have assembled pretty quickly. If you compare this effort led by Donald Trump to other possibly comparable situations where the EU and others, for example, take 50, 60, 70 meetings before anything's actually happening. I mean, this is a group of world leaders who have assembled pretty quickly. I mean, could it not just be the case that everything that you're crying out for is coming? They just haven't, frankly, had time to disseminate that detail yet.
Board of Peace, by their book, or on paper, it's amazing project. But what about the implementation? Let's talk about yesterday's meeting, which was the first meeting of Board of Peace. I watched the 3 hours of the meeting. They are talking like literally disconnected from the reality. Most of the speeches, I cannot generalize definitely, of course, but most of the speeches or statements done by world leaders was literally, I felt like they are disconnected completely from the reality. Since October 2025, since the ceasefire, more than 600 Palestinians have been killed. And yesterday they were talking about, yes, we succeeded, we stopped the war. Which war did you stop? People still, Israel is still killing people. Yesterday, Marco Rubio, he was talking about numbers and the numbers of trucks entered Gaza Strip. He was saying monthly basis since October 2025, more than 4,000 trucks are entering every month. This is not true. Maximum from 200 to 250. I calculated yesterday after that number, after he said that number, like more than 4,000 times 30 days a month equals more than 600 trucks are entering every day. This is not true. So the reality is different. We need, and we are, all of us, we are waiting tangible proof from Board of Peace to show us that their intention is really reconstruction and to get life back to Gaza people. Till now, the technocrat committee, Israel didn't allow them to enter and to work in Gaza Strip, and they are under Board of Peace.
Norhan, let's just examine that then, because it's a good point you make. What would that litmus test be? What would it take that is, you think, is realistic to at least send a signal to the communities in the Palestinian communities that this is serious, that this is going to be unlike where they perhaps feel promises have been broken before?
Gaza people, despite of what's happening around them, they still have small hope. But what they are seeing around them, watching, is not enforcing that hope. They are, in Board of Peace, they are talking about always the future. We will build buildings, we will build towers, we will do this, we will do things in the future. But the Gaza people, those who are living under the rain, in the tents, they will not wait for those towers and buildings and resorts. They need temporary housing for now. They need humanitarian aid to access Gaza Strip. They need to be evacuated, those medical critical cases to be evacuated. Not maximum 50 people will be allowed to exit Gaza or to enter Gaza Strip. More than 50,000 medical critical cases need to be evacuated to Egypt or Jordan. So from where they will have that hope or signals?
Yeah, it is obviously an enormous challenge ahead. Professor Dr. El-Baya, we thank you very much indeed for your analysis and for joining us on PrimeTime.
Thank you.
Okay, well, as we've heard, US President Donald Trump says $7 billion has been pledged to Gaza reconstruction, and this has happened at the inaugural Board of Peace meeting in Washington. But there's a major condition attached, that the complete disarmament of Hamas happens and backing from Israel. Now, this is an area where right now, at least, some uncertainty remains. Here's more.
US President Donald Trump convened the inaugural meeting of his newly formed Board of Peace in Washington, bringing together representatives from nearly 50 countries to advance a reconstruction and stabilization framework for Gaza. During the session, Trump announced that contributing nations had raised more than $7 billion towards an initial relief and reconstruction package.
Together, we're committed to achieving a Gaza that is properly governed throughout. The whole area is going to be, so many countries that have really nothing to do with the Middle East, but they may be somewhat close by today. And I'm pleased to announce that Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, UAE, Morocco, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Uzbekistan, and Kuwait have all contributed more than $7 billion toward the relief package. That's great. Thank you, fellas. Thank you.
Coexistence among Egypt support the mandate of the Board of Peace.
The achievements of the ceasefire is real.
Supporting Gaza through the Board of Peace.
Several countries outlined their pledges. Qatar committed $1 billion. The United Arab Emirates announced $1.2 billion, while Saudi Arabia and Kuwait each confirmed $1 billion contributions. Kazakhstan offered financial support and wheat supplies as part of humanitarian assistance. President Trump initially included Azerbaijan in the $7 billion package. However, Azerbaijan's assistant to the president, Hikmet Hajiev, later clarified that while Azerbaijan supports the Board of Peace as a founding member and may consider future investment projects in Gaza, it does not envisage participating in the announced financial initiative. On security, Indonesia pledged up to 8,000 troops for a proposed international stabilization force. Morocco, Kazakhstan, and Albania committed personnel, while Egypt and Jordan agreed to train Palestinian police units. The force is expected to begin deployment in Rafah, with longer-term plans to expand to 12,000 police officers and 20,000 soldiers. Leaders also highlighted reconstruction priorities, including housing, electricity, water, healthcare, education, and digital infrastructure. The World Bank will act as a limited trustee for donor funds, providing financial oversight. Despite previous criticism of the United Nations, Trump said the board would work closely with the organization and pledged US support to ensure it remains viable.
We're going to be working with the United Nations very closely. We're going to bring them back. I think the United Nations has great potential, really great potential. It has not lived up to potential. The 8 wars, I never even spoke to them about one of them, and I should be speaking to them about all of them. Someday I won't be here. The United Nations will be, I think, is going to be much stronger, and the Board of Peace is going to almost be looking over the United Nations and making sure it runs properly. But we're going to strengthen up the United Nations.
Major political questions remain unresolved, including the disarmament of Hamas, the withdrawal of Israeli forces, and Gaza's long-term governance. While declaring the war in Gaza over, Trump warned that failure by Hamas to disarm would be harshly met. The board's success will now depend on whether pledged funds materialize and whether security and political conditions allow reconstruction to move from plans to reality.
Well, to help us unpack what this could mean, not just for Gaza, but for the wider region, I'm joined in the studio now by A News's Inside Politics host, Anastasia Lavrina. Anastasia, very good to have you with us in the studio. Azerbaijan's name mentioned. Azerbaijan clearly a big part of this Board of Peace. There was a clarification issued by Mr. Hajiev around the funding. Just give us a summary of Azerbaijan's role in this board.
Yes, we have to indeed clarify Azerbaijan's stance within this initiative once again. Since the beginning, since the time Donald Trump himself sent an official invitation to Azerbaijani leader Ilham Aliyev to join as a founding member of this initiative, immediately Azerbaijan responded positively. And on the 22nd of January, during the ceremony when the organization was officially launched in Davos, on the sideline of the Global Economic Forum, I guess Azerbaijan, personally, the leader of Azerbaijan participated at this ceremony, and all of these can highlight the, let's say, official position of Azerbaijan and the willingness to contribute to the work of this organization, a new international organization in the global politics, which will try all its best with all the efforts and all the assistance from the global world to make sure that the peace processes in Gaza is going smoothly and the reconstruction process is also can be achieved in the nearest months, years, and etc. Yesterday during the ceremony we could see the plan the team already presented on how they see the future development of Gaza. Therefore, here I guess Azerbaijan since the beginning joined the initiative, what I want to say, and is ready to proceed smoothly further together with Donald Trump and other joint member states. And when Hikmet Haji publicly clarified Azerbaijan's position, I guess it was a strategic calibration that suggests potential targeted, let's say, investments, the possible infrastructure, humanitarian and technical expertise Azerbaijan can share there during the reconstruction period. But we are not limited to that $1 billion initiative, which was proposed since the beginning. So for the future, definitely having a huge background and expertise in work with the humanitarian aspects in different parts of the world, I guess Azerbaijan indeed can contribute. But now Azerbaijan is engaging, but on its own terms.
And it's a different type of multilateral organisation, this, isn't it? It's got a very different feeling about it, and there are different actors at that top table. Do you think that this is going to be potentially a game changer for Azerbaijan geopolitically?
I guess, first of all, we have to highlight that it's already a game changer in the global politics, because this is a unique organization where each member state has a let's say, the same position with other members. There is no veto power, there is no the Security Council, and we can see that there is such countries like Indonesia, the Muslim majority countries. There is also Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan who are representing the Central Asia, Azerbaijan and Armenia from the South Caucasus. And I guess for the first time we can see that there is a limitation of the European powers. There is no United Kingdom, no Germany, no France. There is Hungary as an official founding member state. Viktor Orban personally participated yesterday at the ceremony, but let's say Italy is presented as an observer. But again, global European powers, they are not part of this organization at the moment. Therefore, we can see the representation at the highest level from the countries from all around the world. And Azerbaijan, it's indeed, I guess, it's a great asset to this structure, because first of all, Azerbaijan is can serve as a bridge within the broader global diplomacy. Azerbaijan is a unique country having great relations with many countries all around the world in the Middle East, and it has, as J.D. Vance mentioned himself, coming to Azerbaijan and Armenia. Azerbaijan is the only country together with the United States that has a good relations together with Turkey and with Israel. In the region itself, before it was all countries except of Armenia, but now together with Armenia, Azerbaijan has a very good relations with all bordering states. So with this great background and good relations, Azerbaijan indeed, as I mentioned, can serve as a bridge in the diplomacy and diplomatic forces in the future. The second is post-conflict reconstruction expertise Azerbaijan has. Since the end of the 44-day patriotic war in 2020, Azerbaijan, I will say, spent a lot of efforts and indeed did a great job in the process of reconstructions taking place together with some other countries in liberated Karabakh and East Zangezur. And it's being done in accordance with the global standards, with the sustainable development goals. Now I mean the renewables, the AI technologies, the technical hubs, the new projects from the energy perspective, from the technical perspectives, meaning that Azerbaijan indeed can share all of this expertise with other member states and contribute a lot to the reconstruction process in Gaza. And the third very important aspect is the experience of Azerbaijan has from the logistical perspective, from the development of transport links and communication. Yesterday at the official ceremony it was mentioned that Gaza now indeed needs a lot of work to be done for recovery, reconstruction, and the establishment of one power, one administration that will serve the future processes. But for the future, taking into account the strategically important location of Gaza Strip, it has to be integrated into the global economy and having good relations, prosperous relations with the neighboring countries. So here the expertise Azerbaijan can also propose, meaning that it will help Gaza to integrate into the region, into the regional economy and to the global economy as well.
Yeah, it's very interesting, as you say, the way that this has been put together. Kazakhstan, Indonesia, they're mentioned in terms of the security component. There are many Muslim majority countries that are involved here. Qatar, of course, has been a strong supporter in the past of the Palestinian cause. Azerbaijan, as you mentioned, has great relations with both Israel and Turkey. What does the construction of the board tell you about the way that this is sort of reframing geopolitics going forward?
I guess it will be good to mention here also that Azerbaijan plays a very important role in the connection of the Central Asia, South Caucasus, Europe and the United States. Meaning that just recently there was a very important conference held here in Baku, C6 platform. And last year we could observe the great interest from the Washington DC in the fostering relations with Central Asian states from the perspectives of development, the energy links, the transport links, and etc. So having Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan within this organization, Azerbaijan and even Armenia. In the South Caucasus there is also Georgia, but now we do not see the active participation of Georgia in this platform, probably due to some challenges in the relations together with the European Union and the United States. But Georgia also has a great experience from the perspectives of developing the transport links communications. Therefore, we cannot exclude that probably in the future Georgia will also join this initiative. Here it's important to mention the United Nations. There were one key question whether this organization is going to replace the United Nations or not.
Mr. Trump will oversee it, apparently.
Exactly. And as he mentioned yesterday, he said that he hopes that in the future, when probably he's not in chairmanship of the Board of Peace organization, he will see United Nations much stronger than it is now. So probably it will indeed foster some processes within this organization to make sure that this organization actually wake up from all of the mistakes some countries are blaming this organization done so far. Indeed, just follow the process. Within 6 months, maybe 7 months, the countries come up with a solution about the future of Gaza. Yes, this is the basic elements which were discussed yesterday, but there is a plan, there is a concrete steps to be done to achieve the result. And more or less, there is a stability in the region now. There is a peaceful negotiation, peace talk between the member states of this new organization, I will say, about the future of Gaza Strip in coexistence with Israel, about the future disarmament of Hamas group, on how it will be done, about the security forces to be trained with support of the countries like Turkey, Qatar, Egypt even, the countries who are willing to send them the equipment required for the population as a first stage of the reconstruction process. So indeed, and all of this was achieved just within 6 or 7 months. Since the time Donald Trump proposed 20 points peace plans on the Gaza stability, security and reconstruction. United Nations couldn't do it. And yesterday, Donald Trump also referred to the situation in the South Caucasus. He said that the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan couldn't be resolved within 30 years, 32 years. And then within just a couple of days, he was able to help the countries to come up with a solution, to shake the hands. The photo was taken yesterday when President Aliyev and Prime Minister Pashinyan shake the hands in the large auditorium when the procedure was taking place. So we can see the practical steps now within this, I would say, comparatively new established organization. So probably indeed that will be a great impetus for the organization like the United Nations. And as it's being highlighted many times, the world is bigger than 5. Here is example on how the organization may be formed with all countries having the same equal rights without veto power. I guess Donald Trump himself only has a veto power, but all countries have the rights to participate, express their attitude to the global problems. And if they are succeeded with the situation in Gaza, I am more than sure Donald Trump is planning to bring more global conflicts within this context to be discussed at a large scale.
And Anastasia, we heard from Professor Albaya earlier. She was making the point that Palestinian communities are crying out for practical help. There's an awful lot of work to be done. What role do you envisage that Azerbaijan and other Central Asian countries can play potentially in getting that practical help to those communities?
We already can see the practical achievements. As yesterday during the ceremony it was mentioned what is required for Gaza Strip, what is required for the people. And among the first priorities it's of course the assistance, emergency, the people are in need there. So those of them who need to be evacuated, to be taken to the hospitals in other countries, that must happen first. Then of course such basic things like water, electricity, then the education, the young generation to be let's say educated and then later on to be employed. Then the police forces who has to be trained and then to take sure that they are responsible for the security environment in the Gaza Strip. Azerbaijan also, I guess Azerbaijan, it was a unique experience in Afghanistan and Iraq. And coming to Azerbaijan, J.D. Vance also remembered how Azerbaijan contributed to the, the peacekeeping forces contributed in Afghanistan, and Azerbaijan and Turkey, the forces were among the latest who just left the country. So having all of this experience, having the experience from the dealing with the reconstruction from the scratch that's happened in Karabakh and East Zangezur, then having all of those diplomatic tools and a great experience as a chairman in the non-aligned movement, good relations with the African states, with the Middle East, with the Central Asia, with European countries, with the United States, China, Russia, and even Iran. Just imagine that these all background and good, unique opportunities we can offer to start with the basic humanitarian needs and then proceed with the global processes which indeed are most needed for the people in Gaza. Probably come up with a solution as representatives, the head of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Turkey yesterday mentioned. Turkey will insist on the establishment of two-state solution. So from the basic needs until the global practical steps and political steps to make sure that peace and security achieved now to be long-lasting. That's a long process, but if it started now, the countries need to proceed further and have a one voice on how Gaza will look in near future.
Anastasia, it's always great to have you with us in the studio.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for your analysis.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at the top business news stories of the day with Katie Wilson. Stay tuned. A warm welcome back to Primetime. Katie Wilson is with us with the very latest business news stories. Katie, what's on your agenda tonight?
Well, before we start the business roundup, we do have some breaking news out of Washington. So President Trump's sweeping global tariffs have been struck down by the US Supreme Court. They have ruled that the president has exceeded his authority by imposing the tariffs via a law that's reserved for national emergencies. They say President Trump needed congressional approval to impose taxes on imports. Now, we'll know more about this as the story develops, but Wall Street has responded positively so far in early trading, and companies are already suing for refunds. So, of course, we'll bring you the latest developments on that story as we have them. Now, back to the business roundup. We begin this evening with the landmark US trial over youth social media addiction. Mark Zuckerberg took the stand on Wednesday, telling the court that Meta Platforms does not allow children under 13 on Facebook or Instagram, despite being confronted with internal documents suggesting young users were a key target.
Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg testified in court on Wednesday that the Facebook and Instagram operator does not allow kids under 13 on its platforms, despite being confronted with evidence suggesting they were a key demographic. He took the stand as part of a landmark trial over youth social media addiction. The case involves a California woman who started using Instagram and YouTube as a child. She alleges the company sought to profit by hooking kids on their services, and claims the apps fueled her depression and suicidal thoughts. Meta and Google have denied the allegations and pointed to their work to add features that keep users safe. Meanwhile, Meta's rival Snap and TikTok settled with the plaintiff before the trial kicked off last week. On Wednesday, Mark Lanier, a lawyer for the woman suing, confronted Zuckerberg with internal Meta documents. He showed jurors emails from 2014 and 2015 in which Zuckerberg laid out aims to increase time spent on Instagram by double-digit percentage points. Zuckerberg said that while Meta previously had goals related to the amount of time users spent on the app, it has since changed its approach. Meta faces potential damages at the jury trial in Los Angeles, part of a wave of litigation against social media companies in the U.S. Cases there are beginning to go to trial amid a broader global backlash over the platform's effect on young users.
Well, before that Supreme Court ruling, the US and Indonesia shook hands on a new trade deal, and Jakarta is calling it a win. Washington still wants to stick with a 19% tariff, but key Indonesian exports like coffee, chocolate, and even palm oil will be tariff-free, as both sides seek to dial down tensions and open up markets.
Indonesia and the U.S. have signed a new trade deal, with Washington maintaining the 19% tariff on goods exported by the Southeast Asian country. Jakarta said Indonesian coffee, chocolate, natural rubber, and spices would be tariff-free. It also won an exemption for its top export, palm oil, which accounts for almost 10% of the country's overseas shipments. Textile products from Indonesia will be subject to a 0% levy under a tariff rate quota mechanism that is yet to be finalized. Washington last year agreed to lower the duty on Indonesia's exports to the United States to 19%, down from an initial 32%. During the negotiations on the new deal, the U.S. agreed to drop its requests to add non-economic provisions to the deal. That includes those related to nuclear reactor development and the South China Sea. According to a White House fact sheet about the agreement, Indonesia will remove tariff barriers on most U.S. products. It will also address a range of non-tariff barriers, such as local consent requirements. Jakarta will also accept U.S. product standards on vehicle safety, emissions, medical devices, and pharmaceuticals. Indonesia will also allow and facilitate U.S. investment in critical minerals and energy resources. The deal takes effect 90 days after both sides complete the related legal procedures. Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto traveled to Washington for the agreement and to attend the first leaders' meeting of U.S. President Donald Trump's Board of Peace.
To the auto industry now, and Renault is hitting a few speed bumps. The French car maker is warning of slimmer margins ahead after a sharp drop in profits last year, spooking investors and knocking its shares. With Chinese rivals piling into Europe and competition heating up, Renault says it's ready for the fight.
Renault shares fell around 6% on Thursday. Investors sold off after the French automaker forecast lower margins for this year as it takes on strong competition. It's aiming for around a 5.5% group operating margin in 2026, down from last year's 6.3%. Renault had previously warned market conditions were difficult in the second quarter, especially in the European van market it leads, although it expects its van business to grow again this year. Renault said fierce rivalries in passenger cars will continue as more Chinese brands arrive in Europe. Larger rival Stellantis is also pushing an aggressive sales strategy to regain market share. Renault CEO Francois Provost said the car maker was ready to fight Chinese competition with lower costs and a fast pace of new model launches. Renault further reported Thursday a 15% fall in operating profit for last year to $12.8 billion. That was the auto giant's first loss in 5 years. It was largely due to a one-off write-down of $10.9 billion in July on its stake in struggling partner Nissan.
Danone is kicking off 2026 on a high note. The French food giant beat expectations in 2025, buoyed by strong baby food sales in China. Investors are keeping an eye on infant formula recalls, but for now, Danone says the impact is not material.
French food group Danone said it was starting 2026 with confidence. That's after it delivered 2025 sales and cash above analysts' expectations. It was helped by baby food demand in China and improved its profit margin thanks to cost cuts. Danone, like rival Nestlé, faces investor pressure to spell out the financial impact of infant formula recalls tied to a contamination scare with the toxin cereulide. It said at this stage the impact was, quote, not material. The consumer goods giant reported 2025 sales of $32.07 billion, a like-for-like rise of 4.5%, slightly ahead of analyst projections. The performance reflected sustained demand for medical nutrition and baby food in China, which largely offset weakness in coffee creamers in a competitive US market. For 2026, Danone said its forecast was in line with its midterm ambition of like-for-like sales growth of 3 to 5%. Danone, like rivals Unilever and Nestlé, has slowed price hikes after 3 years of steep increases. It's trying to win back shoppers who had turned to cheaper brands during a surge in inflation. Investors have been focusing in recent weeks on the potential risk to sales following the infant formula recalls. While Danone's recall appears to be limited so far to Europe and excludes the Chinese market, analysts worry about a risk of reputational damage.
And it's not just Danone kicking off 2026 with good news. Nestlé is in the spotlight too. The Swiss food giant beat fourth quarter sales forecasts and is now focusing on 4 core businesses. Nestlé is pushing to streamline operations despite those past infant formula recall challenges.
Nestlé is in talks to sell its remaining ice cream businesses. Thursday's announced move is part of CEO Philippe Navratil's drive to streamline the Swiss consumer food group. The Nescafé coffee maker said it's in advanced talks to sell ice cream businesses in Asia, Canada and parts of Latin America. The proposed buyer is Häagen-Dazs owner Froneri, which is a joint venture Nestlé helped set up. Nestlé holds a 50% stake in Froneri, which was valued at around $18 billion, including debt, last October. The Nescafé maker plans to sharpen its focus to 4 businesses led by its strongest brands. Those include its coffee, pet care, nutrition and food and snacks units. Thursday's update came as the company reported better than expected fourth quarter sales growth. It was up 4% in the quarter to the end of December, above projections of 3.4%. But it's been a challenging start for Navratil, who announced plans to cut 16,000 jobs soon after taking over in September. He wants to turn the packaged goods giant into a faster-moving firm, although his targets were hit in previous months by the biggest infant formula recall in Nestlé's recent history. The firm has also seen negative impacts from US import tariffs and foreign exchange, as well as consumers with less purchasing power. Looking ahead, Nestlé expects full-year organic sales to be in the range of 3 to 4% for 2026. It also forecasts an improvement in its underlying trading operating profit margin this year. Nestlé sales were up around 4% in early European trade before scaling back.
And finally, over in Havana, Cuban businesses have found a resourceful and eco-friendly way to deal with power outages. From rooftops to rickshaws, people are turning to solar power as fuel for their business and home. It's a boost for the local economy amid a deepening energy squeeze.
These workers in Havana, Cuba, are hoisting solar panels onto rooftops under the hot sun. Demand for alternative energy like solar has increased as the country grapples with a worsening fuel crisis. That's since the US moved to restrict oil shipments to Cuba, including from key supplier Venezuela. Installer Raydel Cano said both homes and businesses have been adopting solar to deal with power outages.
Se ha incrementado la demanda, la solicitud de los clientes.
Demand has increased, customer requests have been growing, and because of the increase in demand for electricity, due to power outages in Cuba and all that, and in private businesses due to the power consumption plans they have to comply with, they have been forced to install panels so as to not exceed those plans and to save a little electricity. And in homes, individuals have been forced to install this type of equipment.
The panels supply power to a cafe. Owner Dariam Soto Navarro said they initially used a portable generator, but found it increasingly difficult to obtain diesel. Other Cubans have gotten creative with the placement of solar panels. Before starting his journey, rickshaw driver Alejandro Aritola wiped down the one mounted on top of his vehicle. He says it helps to extend his mileage.
I've been preparing for this for a long time. In this country, it's true that the electricity situation has always been difficult. I used to have an old rickshaw. I put 2 panels on it, but it wasn't enough. I managed to trade it in for this hybrid one and put this panel on it about 8 or 10 months ago. It helps me a lot. It extends my range, and I don't have to use gasoline. When the power goes out, I put it in front of the house and charge it. It has also helped a lot that people, after seeing me, are doing this too. They are inspired and are also trying to put panels on their houses and rickshaws.
There we have it. That's your Business News Roundup for the day. Of course, we'll bring you all of those latest developments out of Washington as they come. But for now, back to you, Guy.
Katie, thank you very much indeed. Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at the continuing investigation into Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and the growing reaction from the palace, Washington and the public. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Primetime. Well, the fallout is still unfolding following the arrest of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the younger brother of King Charles. Police inquiries are continuing and searches remain underway. Meanwhile, responses are emerging from Buckingham Palace, from Washington, and from an ever-watching public.
Police remain outside Royal Lodge in Windsor as searches continue following the arrest of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor on suspicion of misconduct in public office. The 66-year-old was detained on Thursday morning, his birthday, and questioned for around 11 hours. Thames Valley Police later confirmed he was released under investigation. He has not been charged and denies wrongdoing. King Charles, who was not informed in advance, said the law must take its course and pledged the royal family's full cooperation. The case has drawn international reaction. US President Donald Trump called it damaging for the monarchy.
It's a very, very sad, to me, it's a very sad thing. When I see that, it's a very sad thing. To see it and to see what's going on with his brother, who's obviously coming to our country very soon, and he's a fantastic man, the king. So I think it's a very sad thing.
At the United Nations, spokesperson Stefan Dujarric declined to comment directly, but called for stronger investigations into abuse linked to Epstein. For the family of Virginia Giuffre, who accused Andrew of sexual abuse in a lawsuit settled in 2022 and died by suicide last year, the arrest brought emotion and a sense of justice.
This is where the house of cards starts falling. And, kudos to the UK for taking the first step, for saying, you know what, we are going to arrest somebody who is held to one of the highest esteems out there, somebody who was a former prince. I mean, this hasn't been done before. And so to know what we should expect, it's really naive to say that we do, but we won't stop. I mean, Virginia said it so clearly in her statements, and I'll say it again here today, we won't stop until justice is served.
Across Britain and Europe, newspapers led with a striking image of Andrew slumped in the back of a crossover as he left the police station. Several front pages described an unprecedented moment for the monarchy. Public reaction ranged from shock to relief.
I didn't think so, no. I thought he'd go into hiding and get away with it. Yeah, so, no, that's all I've got to say, really. I'm pleased.
But the prince, I mean, that's wild. I think people are gonna really be, that affects a whole country, him being on that list. So, yeah, we'll see what happens.
The investigation centres on allegations that while serving as the UK's Special Representative for Trade and Investment, he shared confidential government documents with Jeffrey Epstein. Newly released US files suggest he forwarded reports on countries including Vietnam and Singapore. Andrew stepped back from public duties in 2019 over his links to Epstein and resigned as trade envoy in 2011. It is the first arrest of a senior royal in modern times.
Now, to get a clearer sense of what this means politically in Britain, I'm joined now by Oliver Dean, who is digital editor at Mace magazine in London. Oliver, thank you very much indeed for joining us on Primetime. The King totally, unequivocally supporting the police then. I assume that he just wouldn't do that unless the evidence was totally damning. The former prince is going to prison, isn't he?
Well, firstly, Guy, good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me on. I actually don't know whether Andrew is going to face jail time at this moment, but I think the King, fully supporting the police and their efforts and their activities isn't necessarily that surprising. we have to take into consideration the fact that were the king to fully support Andrew or not lend his full support to the police service, then that could throw the entire idea of the monarchy into a very serious question. If it's seen by the public that the king is seeking to protect his brother, is seeking to insulate him from the full force of the law, then that will not go down well with the British public. And so I think it's not that surprising that we have seen the king come out in support of the police today.
Yeah, it's a very good point you make there, because clearly this is a very sensitive moment, potentially a critical moment for the monarchy. Do you sense then, based on what you said, that King Charles, possibly Prince William too, that they're trying to set out a new future almost for the royal family? Higher standards of personal behaviour, more transparency, more perhaps earning respect rather than demanding it?
Yes, and I think the fact that we have seen, like you said, the king coming out against his brother, there needs to be some type of revamp, some type of, new face for the British monarchy. As it currently stands, they seem to be embroiled in scandal. And we saw as well, excuse me, once Queen Elizabeth II died, there were many questions as to whether the monarchy was actually going to continue. We saw massive protests during King Charles III's coronation with people saying, quote, he's not my king. And so the fact now that we're seeing the royal family embroiled in an even larger scandal, an even bigger, question of relevance and significance, I think it's worrying times for the royal family, and questions are going to be asked by the British public as to whether this is necessarily the system that they want to continue with.
And Oliver, when you look at sort of legally what's happened, I mean, the monarch himself or herself, as I understand it, cannot be arrested due to the status that they have. Other royals can, though, and have always been able to, at least in theory. It's just that it's never happened, or at least not in modern times. Do you think, given that law is all about precedent, do you think that we could potentially now start to see more princes, dukes, princesses potentially getting prosecuted for things?
Well, I don't even think it's necessarily to do with just royalty. I think it's people in positions of power and positions of authority and positions of significance that are now going to be facing the full force of the law. I think the British public are angry. They are angry at that for too long people in positions of power have been, turned a blind eye to by the police, by other, intelligence services and forces and so forth. And people are fed up with it. And the fact is now we are seeing someone who held a position of extreme significance, who was born into a family destined to rule. And we are seeing that, they are not above the law. And I think that sends a very strong message. It reassures the public that we can have faith in our institutions, in our police force, in our public services to actually protect our interests and to challenge power when it is necessary. And I think, that's going to be very welcoming for a lot of people in Britain.
I just want to go back to the Epstein scandal more widely, if I can, just tap into your political expertise. I mean, do you think part of the problem in terms of the sort of reticence or the sort of protracted way in which this all became uncovered and the prosecution of people began, do you think part of the problem was that people on the left and the right of politics were implicated? Business leaders on both sides of the debates on technology and finance were implicated. So in a sense, no one side felt emboldened or risk-free to sort of really go after Epstein and prosecute him. Was that, in a sense, the sort of awful genius of the plan?
I think that's a very fair way to put it. And, people often criticize Trump for being in the files, and, the left would often label him as, this right-wing figure and it's only the right-wing people who are in there. And then we saw Noam Chomsky was named in the files as well. And so I think this isn't a matter of left versus right or conservative versus liberal or however else you want to put it. This is a question. This is a case, of people in extreme positions of power who hoard extreme wealth, taking advantage of that power and that influence and using it against regular people. And like I said earlier, I think the people are angry and people are fed up.
And Oliver, just back to the UK now. Who do you think wins and loses from this situation politically? I mean, we've got local elections not far away, a very unpopular Prime Minister, we've seen the rise of the right, but then we've also seen some fragmentation, almost a civil war on the right too. Do you think this scandal is going to shift the public, the voters, one way or another?
I don't think it's fair to say that there is any one particular winner. No one has come out particularly and significantly well from this. However, if I had to pick one person who has probably come out better than the rest of them combined, it would actually be Nigel Farage. And that might seem quite surprising, but the whole idea of reform is that they are this anti-establishment party. You know, they are taking a wrecking ball to Westminster and, you know, the politics and system that we've had for centuries at this point. And so when these establishment figures, when these elites are named in these files, and people are seeing, you know, the crimes that they've committed and the fact that they've taken advantage of their power and positions, when someone is now coming along and saying, well, I've been pledging to take this wrecking ball to the establishment for years now, a lot of people are going to welcome that. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how reform you know, face up to the fact that they might get significant support as a result of this.
Oliver, great to have you with us on the show. Thank you very much indeed for your analysis.
Thank you.
Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at India joining the US-led Pax Silica initiative on AI and chip supply chains. Do stay with us. A warm welcome back to PrimeTime, wherever you're watching. Now, India held the AI Impact Summit on Friday, bringing together some of the biggest names in tech. Bill Gates was due to headline the event, but pulled out suddenly amid questions over his past ties to Jeffrey Epstein. But at the event in New Delhi, India signed a declaration to join Pax Silica, the US-led initiative to secure AI and semiconductors supply chains. Now, this move aims to reduce reliance on rivals like China and strengthen cooperation with allied partners. US and Indian officials attended the signing. The summit also saw $200 billion pledged for AI projects in India, with major investments from Reliance Industries and Tata Group. At the AI Impact Summit in New Delhi, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres urged that AI should benefit everyone and called for evidence-based understanding rather than fear. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron said India and France will work together to shape a responsible and innovative AI future. Now, to get a clearer strategic read on what this summit really signals, I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Richard Mort, strategic intelligence creator. He's joining us from the United Kingdom. Richard, good to see you there. Thank you very much for joining us on PrimeTime. A lot to unpack here, isn't there? How significant do you think this moment is for global AI governance then? Are we seeing a genuine emergence of a sort of a new centre of gravity?
Thank you for having me, Guy. Pleasure to be here. Well, it's the fourth summit in this series. Bletchley Park, Seoul, Paris last year, and now New Delhi. It's the first summit of its kind by a global South nation. The number of delegations increased, heads of states, 500,000 visitors, and signatories is up from Paris. So I think we have progress in that area. But in terms of the US influence, you mentioned Paxton. Trump himself was not in person. His tech advisor, Kratsios, was here. And, quote, "We totally reject global governance of AI." So I think there are some mixed signals. I think America is obviously, in the AI arms race, it has a leading position at the moment, but it's open to question whether it's completely open to a global AI progress or whether it wants to keep itself in the front pack. So it's very interesting, yeah.
And what about India itself, Richard? Because there seems to be a sense that they're positioning themselves as almost like a bridge between innovation and regulation. How credible do you think a claim like that is, considering what plenty of other nations are doing?
economically, as most people listening probably know or viewing know, India is rocketing. You know, GDP wise, it overtook Japan, and over 250 billion investment commitments announced, GPUs, bilateral deal with the US on AI policy, and so on. But I think the infrastructure problems cannot be swept under the carpet, and there is a kind of there's a contradiction there. There's AI progressing, but the political problems and the problems nationally haven't gone away. So I think it's there's two sides to every coin, and I think it is credible. It needs to sort of get its own house in order before it can be really regarded as I would say doing everything that needs to be done. So in terms of yes, progress is being made, but there needs to be progress domestically as well.
And Richard, I don't want to be cynical about this, and you've got the expertise and knowledge to perhaps prove me wrong and tell me I don't need to be. But when you hear this talk of human-centric artificial intelligence, is that really possible? Surely the big institution, the big tech companies are just going to take advantage of people one way or the other, whether you label it as being a sort of enforced benevolence or whether you label it as just unbridled capitalism. Either way, the tech giants win, don't they?
I mean, I was in Davos recently, and the tech giants were there in force. And definitely, AI is as I said, I mentioned the word arms race. They gain from people. The more people use their platforms and pay for it, the more they gain. But I would say that the benefits are undeniable. I recently compared using AI to almost becoming like using Google Maps or becoming part of daily life to that extent. So I think human-centric in that way is a fair comparison, because for many of us in the world, when we have an issue now, when we have a question, when we have something we want to debate, AI is part of the equation. So I think, yes, it is human centric, but the people who control it maybe have other agendas. But in terms of penetration and changing, life on an individual level, I think it's definitely, doing that.
And the geopolitics around some of this, Richard, I mean, how significant is that? India have their own friends and foes like any other nation, I suppose. Do these sort of moments of political tension, when they cross over with these sort of technological advances, is the politics significant?
I mean, it is, I think. I mean, recently we've seen that, although I mentioned America leading the way in terms of AI and the tech giants, which need no introduction, China has come, quite out of no way to produce things like DeepSeek and Kimi recently, which I know myself is really producing results with far less spend and footprint, and this is despite various tariffs and controls on chips and technologies. So I think geopolitical tensions are there, but AI is progressing nonetheless, and I think it's kind of inexorable. And it's a race. At the moment, I would say China and US are in the race, and India is probably not up and coming. So yeah, very interesting time.
And perhaps a different sort of race that might also be going on is the sort of race between governments and governance structures, multilateral organisations, and private enterprises themselves. Is there a sense that perhaps work has been done on regulation, thinking through how to manage this sort of multilaterally, that gap has closed somewhat, or are the tech giants still always one or two steps ahead?
I think the tech giants, whether we like it or not, there are enough people producing platforms and extreme results we know in terms of billions and building data centers, that whether, even if a large proportion of them are under government control, it only takes one or two, make it towards this AGI, which is held up as the kind of target. And once one bomb in somewhere gets to this point, then it's past the point of no return. So I think governments have to be seen to control AI. But interestingly, I lived in Japan myself 20 years. Japan is quite open about AI. And I think the reason for that, for example, is because it's the fastest shrinking, fastest aging population in the world. So they know there's no alternative. They are not going to accept thousands of people into the country to fill the gaps. So AI in Japan is being pushed hard in a way in Europe or in a less regulatory manner because of reason.
Yeah, very interesting point. Richard, fascinating stuff. We thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at the growing tensions between Washington and Tehran. Do stay with us. Welcome back. US President Donald Trump has given Iran a deadline, 10 to 15 days to reach an agreement, warning that failure to do so would bring serious consequences. Well, his remarks come as Iran and Russia carry out joint naval exercises in the Indian Ocean.
Speaking at his first Board of Peace meeting held in Washington on Thursday, US President Donald Trump warned Iran it must do a deal surrounding its nuclear program. He made the comment after talks in Geneva made no real breakthrough, despite sides saying there was progress.
And we do have some work to do with Iran. They can't have a nuclear weapon. It's very simple. You can't have peace in the Middle East if they have a nuclear weapon. And they can't have a nuclear weapon, and they've been told that very strongly. They cannot continue to threaten the stability of the entire region, and they must make a deal. Or if that doesn't happen, I maybe can understand. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But bad things will happen.
Trump hopes the large buildup of military aircraft in the region piles on enough pressure for a deal to be reached. However, Iran and Russia conducted joint naval exercises in the Sea of Oman and the northern Indian Ocean on Thursday. Navy authorities said the exercises were aimed to promote security and sustainable maritime interactions. The increase of military on both sides in the region comes as Tehran refuses to give up its nuclear program and denies it plans to develop atomic weapons.
Well, that warning from Washington has drawn a firm response from Tehran. Iran says it would respond decisively to any military strike, accusing US President Donald Trump of using rhetoric that increases the risk of direct confrontation. A News correspondent Toraz Shirililo reports now from Tehran.
Iran's mission in New York has warned that Tehran will respond decisively and proportionately in the exercise of its inherent right of self-defense under U.S. Charter if it is subjected to a military aggression by the United States. In a letter to UN Chief and President of Security Council, Ambassador Amir Saeed Iravani cited U.S. President's recent threats on using military force against Iran over its nuclear program. Earlier this month, Tehran and Washington resumed new round of nuclear negotiations mediated by Oman, which were interrupted last June by the Israel-US attacks on Iran. But so far, both sides remain divided, with Washington demanding zero enrichment and Tehran rejecting the call to dismantle its civilian nuclear program, which it describes as a red line. Meantime, head of Atomic Energy Organization of Iran, Mohammad Islami, defended the country's right to peaceful nuclear program. Speaking on sidelines of a national event on Thursday, coinciding U.S. President's fresh threat of military invasion if a deal is not reached in 10 to 15 days, Islami said no one can deprive Iran of nuclear energy. While a breakthrough is not achieved following the recent indirect nuclear negotiations, Deputy Foreign Minister for Legal Affairs Kazem Gharibabadi said on Friday that he met with the Chinese and Russian ambassadors in Tehran, discussing with them the latest developments related to the Geneva talks. China and Russia, both permanent members of the UN Security Council with veto power, have backed Iran's right to nuclear program for civilian purposes. Toraz Shirililo, Tehran, Foreign News.
Well, to break down the regional implications and the broader diplomatic picture, I'm joined now by A News' Andy Mioch. Andy, great to have you with us as always. We've heard reports that the UK has declined requests by the US to use British military bases to potentially attack Iran. What has London confirmed, and how unusual would that be if they actually have declined those requests?
Well, Guy, as we speak, Britain's Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper is in Washington, where she's meeting U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio for talks on the announcement said security and defense issues, so it's probably pretty safe to say that this is going to be one of the main topics. Now, when it comes to those reports you've mentioned, there have been quite a few. The Times first reported on Thursday that the UK is yet to give permission for the US to use its bases for future strikes against Iran, citing concerns that those attacks might breach international law. A government spokesperson was quoted as saying that they do not comment on operational matters. Then more reports followed. The BBC, Guardian, Sky News also reported that London has not given the green light to Washington to launch strikes on Iran from two of its bases, the one on Diego Garcia, which is a tiny island in the Indian Ocean. We'll talk about that particular thing in a bit. And RAF Fairford, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering this, Gloucestershire in the UK. Now that Diego Garcia base is at the heart of another flashpoint between Washington and London. If you remember last year, Prime Minister Keir Starmer agreed to hand over the Chagos Islands to Mauritius while retaining the joint US-UK base on Diego Garcia for a 99-year lease of the island. Now, Trump shifted his position on the deal Starmer made. First, he gave his blessing, then he criticized the deal. He then moved to saying it was the best deal that could have been made at the time, to now once again calling it a big mistake. And according to reports, that this fresh criticism was prompted by the UK withholding permission for the US to use its bases regarding Iran. Under the conditions for using this joint base, Britain would need to agree in advance to any operations out of Diego Garcia. Now, Cooper, ahead of her trip to Washington just this morning, she declined to deny the reports when asked by ITV News whether the UK is indeed blocking the US from being able to use these bases to launch attacks on Iran. She said that the two countries have a, quote, long, deep security partnership. And she added that London supports the talks US is having with Iran regarding the nuclear issue.
Now, Andy, as a former resident of a village just outside Fairford in Gloucestershire, I can confirm you did not butcher the name at all. But onto Iran then. How we've seen these naval drills in the Sea of Oman. What's happening there?
Well, we don't have that much information to go on, but officially we've heard that Iran's and Russia's naval forces have launched and completed a simulated rescue operation to retake a hijacked commercial vessel on Thursday in the waters off of Bandar Abbas in southern Iran. Now, according to the IRNA state news agency, the goal of the drill was, quote, upgrading operational coordination as well as exchange of military experiences. Now, there are pundits and analysts who say that this might have been a way, maybe a distraction for Iran to relocate their military assets in this fear or preparation for a possible confrontation with the United States. Iran carried out separate exercises earlier this week as those talks in Geneva with the Americans, frankly, indirectly, were going on. The Iranians briefly closed the Strait of Hormuz, a very important waterway between Iran and Oman, which is vital for global oil supplies, as the 20% of all world's oil passes through that waterway.
Now, Andy, we've seen so much about this sort of build-up of the armada, if you like, from on the US side. We've also seen the deadlines, heard about the 10 to 15 day deadline. Just talk us through in concrete terms what Washington, the steps that the US has actually taken.
Well, we have fresh reports on this military movement. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the world's largest aircraft carrier, was spotted reaching the Mediterranean Sea. Israel's Khan, public broadcaster, said the accompanying warship USS Mayhem transmitted signals near the Strait of Gibraltar indicating the carrier's progress towards eastern Mediterranean. Norwegian newspapers, Fremover, are reporting that the U.S. is pulling much of its air power, including F-35 fighter jets, out of the NATO exercise Cold Response happening in northern Norway due to the tensions with Iran. The U.S. has already positioned another aircraft carrier, the Abraham Lincoln, near Iran, according to trackers and the satellite imagery in recent days. It has been spotted off of the coast of Oman. And that word you used, the Armada, Trump had earlier used that, saying that he is amassing an armada. But just a few hours ago, when asked if he is considering a limited strike to pressure Iran into making a nuclear deal, he told reporters in the White House, and let me quote him here, he says, "I guess I can say I'm considering it."
Very typical Trumpian response, keeping everybody guessing, I suppose. In terms of negotiations, they will obviously be ongoing back-channel negotiations. On top of that, there are these indirect negotiations, which are probably fairly direct negotiations. What is the timeline now when it comes to officially the negotiations that are taking place?
Well, we've had that round in Geneva on Tuesday. Then we heard Donald Trump putting up that 10 to 15 days deadline. And today we've heard again from Iran's foreign minister. Abbas Araghchi told MS Now that he believed a diplomatic deal was within reach and could be achieved in what he described as a very short period of time. Now, an important note here. He said that the U.S. did not seek zero uranium enrichment from Iran and that Iran did not offer to suspend enrichment. He added that he expects to have a draft Iranian proposal ready in the next 2 or 3 days for top Iranian officials to review, and that another round of talks with the U.S. can happen in a week or so. Now, after those comments, the White House reacted saying that, quote, "The president has been clear that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons or the capacity to build them," and the important part, and that they cannot enrich uranium.
Very interesting indeed. And beyond the UK, the US, the other actors we've mentioned, what about the other power blocs? The EU, for example, Russia, how are they reacting to this?
Well, the Russians are warning that any possible US strikes on Iran would carry dangerous consequences. We've heard from Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, in an interview for Al Arabiya, which was aired on Wednesday, where he said previous attacks on Iranian nuclear facilities during that last year's 12-day war Israel had with Iran and had U.S. backup had already created serious risks. Lavrov went on to say that there were risks of a nuclear incident and that everyone understands this is, quote, playing with fire. The Russians are claiming, the Gulf countries are signaling they do not want the tensions to escalate, but when it comes to those countries themselves, we haven't heard much from them, except for last month when the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia said that they would not allow the U.S. to use their airspace to launch attacks on Iran. As for the European Union, we've heard from the Foreign Affairs spokesperson for the European Commission, who told reporters on Thursday that a U.S. attack on Iran would have, quote, heavy repercussions on the stability of the Middle East, and that diplomacy should be given a chance to settle this long-running dispute between Washington and Tehran.
Andy, as always, we thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Okay, after the break, we'll check in with our correspondents all around the world for the very latest developments in their regions. Do stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching PrimeTime. Now let's head to our correspondents all around the world, and we'll start in Georgia. Georgian security services say they've disrupted what they describe as an attempt to obtain and transport radioactive material out of the country, detaining 2 foreign nationals during a counterintelligence operation. Well, A News correspondent Nini Nikolashvili reports now from Tbilisi.
The State Security Service of Georgia says 2 foreign nationals have been arrested in Kutaisi for attempting to illegally purchase nuclear material, uranium and radioactive substance, cesium-137. According to the agency, the suspects were planning to buy the materials for $3 million and transport them to another country. The arrests were carried out by officers from the State Security Service, Counterintelligence and Special Operations Department after processing operational information. Authorities say that the suspects had been traveling to Georgia frequently in recent weeks. They were reportedly trying to create favorable conditions to purchase and move the nuclear and radioactive substances. The State Security Service warned that uranium and cesium-137 can be used for serious criminal acts, including terrorist purposes. Notably, it's not the first such case. Last year, in Batumi, 2 people were detained for handling and attempting to sell $3 million worth of uranium, which could have been used to make a deadly bomb. Nini Nikolashvili, Tbilisi, A News.
Turkey has indicated it's prepared to help train police forces, restore healthcare and education services, and even potentially deploy personnel as part of Gaza's rebuilding effort. Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan outlined those commitments at the inaugural meeting of US President Donald Trump's Board of Peace in Washington on Thursday.
Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan said Turkey is ready to assist in the rehabilitation of Gaza's health and education sectors and help train police forces in the embattled Palestinian territory. Fidan made the remarks in Washington at the inaugural meeting of the Board of Peace chaired by U.S. President Donald Trump. He stressed Ankara's continued support for U.S.-led peace efforts and stated that Turkey was prepared to provide troops for a proposed international stabilization force for Gaza. According to Fidan, the ceasefire in Gaza was achieved after 2 years of human suffering, crediting what he described as President Trump's personal engagement and collective diplomatic efforts for the breakthrough. But he went on to warn that Gaza's humanitarian situation remained fragile and that ceasefire violations continue to occur, calling for a prompt, coordinated and effective international response.
Biz aslında şu mesajı veriyoruz.
Our message is this: whether it's humanitarian aid, the administration of Gaza, infrastructure and superstructure services, or contributing to international stabilization force, we are ready to provide all kinds of support in all these areas.
Several other countries have already pledged to send troops for the proposed stabilization force, including Indonesia, Morocco, Kazakhstan, and Albania. The initiative is aimed at ensuring security, stability, and reconstruction efforts in Gaza following the conflict in which tens of thousands of people in Gaza have been killed. While in Washington, Fidan also reiterated Turkey's hope that the United States would pursue what he described as genuine negotiations with Iran. He added that diplomatic engagement would help avert the need for a military operation or broader war in an already volatile Middle East region. This is Adam Mara for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Kazakhstan has signalled it is also prepared to deploy personnel to Gaza in support of reconstruction efforts. President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev put forward the proposal at the inaugural meeting of US President Donald Trump's Board of Peace in Washington on Thursday. Fariza Kalamazina has the story.
Kazakhstan has announced its readiness to deploy military units as part of the International Stability Forces, a mission expected to be deployed in Gaza. The announcement was made by President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev during the first meeting of the Peace Council in Washington. According to Tokayev, Kazakhstan is considering sending military personnel to Gaza, including medical staff as well as observers to a civil-military coordination center. Beyond security assistance, Kazakhstan has also signaled its intention to participate in Gaza's reconstruction through international companies. planned projects, largely financed from the state budget, could include the rebuilding of infrastructure, housing and social facilities such as schools and hospitals, as well as large-scale debris removal. The Kazakh president also outlined a broader humanitarian and development package. Over the next 5 years, Kazakhstan plans to provide 500 educational grants to Palestinian students and share its experience in digital governance and e-government systems. As one of the world's major wheat producers, the country has also expressed readiness to support food security initiatives in Gaza and beyond. Fariza Kalimurdina, Almaty, A-News.
Uzbekistan has deepened its strategic ties with the United States. Also, during President Shavkat Mirziyoyev's visit to Washington, signing a $1 billion agreement on critical minerals and expanding wider trade and investment cooperation. A-News' correspondent Seville Rajapova reports.
Uzbekistan and US-based Traxys have signed a $1 billion agreement on the extraction and supply of critical minerals, one of the key outcomes of President Shavkat Mirziyoyev's walking visit to Washington. The project oversees cooperation in the development of tungsten, molybdenum and black shale deposits, with projected production capacity of 150 tons per year. The agreement builds on earlier memorandums in the field of rare earths and strategic resources. Traxys confirmed plans to open a representative office in Tashkent as part of expanding long-term cooperation. The minerals deal was signed alongside a broader package of agreements covering energy, agriculture, infrastructure and financial market development. Bilateral trade between Uzbekistan and the United States has exceeded $1 billion, with around 340 American companies operating in the country. During meetings with the U.S. Commerce Secretary, Trade Representative and the leadership of Exim Bank and the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, the sides discussed advancing a 3-year $35 billion economic cooperation program and launching a joint investment platform to support priority projects. Uzbekistan's accession to the World Trade Organization was also addressed, with Washington expressing continued engagement on the process. As part of the visit, President Mirziyoyev also participated in the inaugural Peace Council meeting in Washington, where he expressed Uzbekistan's readiness to contribute to reconstruction efforts in Gaza, including housing, schools and medical facilities. It is Seville Rajapova reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A-News.
Well, that brings us to the end of Prime Time. Please do join us again on Monday for plenty more news and analysis. And from all of us here at A-News, have a great weekend.